Cowboy, do you fear me or desire me? The beautiful black woman asked, her voice cutting through the desert heat as she stood before the broken mountain man amid his ranch's charred remains. The townspeople whispered he was cursed, that 6 months of failure had marked him for ruin. They expected him to crawl away defeated, another victim claimed by mysterious fires plaguing small ranchers. But this mysterious woman studied the burned timber with eyes that held dangerous secrets. She spoke of his grandfather's hidden legacy, of silver veins buried beneath ash, of powerful men who killed for land they thought worthless. The mountain man faced a choice that would determine whether he reclaimed an inheritance worth more than gold or lost everything to those who murdered for it. Would her knowledge save him or destroy them both? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The charred beams of Jeremiah Stone's ranch house cast jagged shadows across the dirt. 6 months had passed since the fire consumed everything his family had built over 3 generations. He kicked at a blackened piece of timber, watching it crumble to ash. The town council meeting that morning still burned in his memory. Colonel Blackwood had stood at the podium, his silver hair gleaming under the oil lamps, addressing the room with practiced authority. "Gentlemen, I'm prepared to offer Mr. Stone $500 for his property. More than generous, considering the circumstances." Jeremiah had felt every eye in the room turn toward him. Judge Reeves sat in the front row, his pale hands folded neatly. The other ranchers studied their boots, afraid to meet his gaze. They knew what he knew. Any one of them could be next. The insurance claim was denied, Judge Reeves had announced, shuffling through papers. Evidence suggests the fire may have been deliberately set by the property owner himself. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Jeremiah's hands had clenched into fists. But Sheriff Vale stepped forward, one hand resting on his gun belt. The message was clear. Now, standing alone in the ruins, Jeremiah replayed every humiliating moment. The whispered conversations that stopped when he entered the general store. The way children pointed at him on the street. The cursed man who burned his own home. A figure approached across the desert. Heat waves made her shimmer like a mirage, but as she drew closer, Jeremiah could see her clearly. A woman with dark skin and intelligent eyes, dressed in traveling clothes that had seen better days. She walked with purpose, her gaze fixed on the destroyed ranch house. "Cowboy, do you fear me or desire me?" she asked. Stopping 10 feet away, Jeremiah stared at her. No introduction. No explanation for why she was here, miles from the nearest town. Just a question that made no sense. "I don't know you, miss." "Eva Cross." She stepped closer, studying the burned timbers with unusual interest. "This fire happened 6 months ago, February 13th. Jeremiah hadn't told anyone the exact date. The newspapers had gotten it wrong. Even the insurance investigator had been off by 2 days. "How do you know that?" Eva walked to where the front porch had stood. She knelt and brushed ash away from a section of foundation, revealing scorch marks that formed a distinct pattern. Coal oil. Poured in a line from the barn to the house. The fire started simultaneously in 4 locations. She stood, dusting off her hands. Professional work. The sheriff said it was lightning. Sheriff Vale says many things. Eva's voice carried an edge. "Tell me about your grandfather." "He's been dead 20 years. "What did he do for work?" Jeremiah frowned. "Ranching. Same as my father. Same as me." He paused. "Until this." Eva pulled a folded paper from her coat. She handed it to him. The document was old, yellow at the edges, covered in legal language that made Jeremiah's head spin. "Can you read this?" "Some of it." He squinted at the cramped handwriting. "It mentions my grandfather's name. Something about mineral rights. Your grandfather owned a 3rd stake in the Silverbrook mine. 40 miles north of here." Eva pointed toward the mountains. "The mine was abandoned in 1862 when the Easy Silver played out." "So?" "New surveying techniques show the vein continues underground, directly beneath your ranch." Eva's eyes met his. "Your land sits on top of one of the richest silver deposits in the territory." Jeremiah's legs felt weak. He sat heavily on a charred log. That's impossible. If there was silver here, someone would have found it. Someone did find it. Eva walked to where the barn had stood. Colonel Blackwood had your property surveyed 3 months before the fire. Judge Reeves signed off on a mining exploration permit. They've been planning this for almost a year. You're saying they burned my ranch for silver that might not even exist? I'm saying they murdered your cattle, destroyed your home, and tried to frame you for arson because they know exactly what's buried here. Eva's voice hardened. The same thing they did to the Morrison place last year, and the Rodriguez family the year before that. Jeremiah thought of his neighbors. Tom Morrison had lost his ranch in a flash flood that destroyed his irrigation system. The Rodriguez family's well had been poisoned, forcing them to sell to Colonel Blackwood at a fraction of the land's worth. You have proof of this? Eva pulled out another document. This one was newer, bearing official seals and signatures. Territorial Surveyor's Report, filed under a false name, but the location coordinates match your property exactly. She pointed to a section of dense text. Estimated yield, $2 million in silver ore. The number hit Jeremiah like lightning. $2 million. Enough to rebuild his ranch 100 times over. Enough to make him one of the wealthiest men in 3 territories. Why are you telling me this? Eva was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried pain she tried to hide. Because Colonel Blackwood killed my family, and your silver mine is going to help me prove it. 3 days after Eva's revelation, Jeremiah watched Colonel Blackwood's men set up surveying equipment on his land. They worked in broad daylight, as if they owned the property already. The boldness of it made his blood boil. They're not even trying to hide it anymore, Eva said, crouching beside him behind a cluster of rocks. She held a spyglass, studying the surveyor's movements with military precision. Judge Reeves had fast-tracked an abandonment hearing for the following morning. 24 hours to prove ownership, or lose everything forever. The legal notice had been posted on a Sunday when most people were in church. By design, Eva lowered the spyglass. We need those survey documents. Without them, we can't prove they knew about the silver before the fire. Blackwood's office is locked up tighter than a bank vault. Not his office, his house. Eva pointed toward the colonel's mansion on the hill overlooking town. He keeps sensitive documents in a personal safe. I watched his routine for 2 days. Jeremiah stared at her. You want us to break into his home? I want us to reclaim evidence of your inheritance. Eva's voice was steady. Unless you prefer to let them steal $2 million. That evening, they watched Colonel Blackwood leave for his weekly poker game at the saloon. Eva had timed his departure 3 nights running, always 8:30, always gone until past midnight. She moved through the darkness like smoke, leading Jeremiah around the back of the mansion. A window on the 2nd floor stood slightly open. Eva produced a coil of rope from her pack, fashioned a lasso with practiced ease, and snagged the window frame on her first throw. Where did you learn to do that? My father taught me. Eva's expression darkened. Before they killed him. She climbed with the skill of someone who had scaled walls before. Jeremiah followed, his rancher's strength making up for his lack of technique. Inside, Eva moved through the house without hesitation, as if she had memorized the layout. Colonel Blackwood's study was a shrine to wealth and power. Oil paintings of distinguished men lined the walls. A massive oak desk dominated the center of the room. Behind it, a steel safe stood partially concealed behind a curtain. Eva knelt before the safe, pressing her ear to the metal as she turned the dial. Her fingers moved with delicate precision, listening for the subtle clicks that indicated each number falling into place. Federal agents taught me lock work, she whispered. Part of my training. What training? I'll explain later. The safe opened with a soft thud. Inside, Eva found exactly what she was looking for. Survey reports dating back 18 months, mining assessments, property valuations, and something that made her freeze. A telegram from Colonel Blackwood to an associate in another territory. The message was brief, but damning. Cross family eliminated. Witness problem solved. Proceeding with land acquisition. Eva's hands trembled as she read her family's death sentence. Jeremiah watched her face transform from determined to devastated to furious in the span of seconds. "They murdered them like animals," she whispered. "Eva, we need to go." She gathered every document from the safe, stuffing them into her pack. As they prepared to leave, footsteps echoed in the hallway below. Colonel Blackwood had returned early. Eva moved to the window, but voices drifted up from the front porch. Judge Reeves and Sheriff Vale had arrived with the colonel. All three men were entering the house. "Back exit," Eva whispered. They crept toward the rear staircase, but the floorboards creaked under their weight. Below, conversation stopped abruptly. "Someone's upstairs," Judge Reeves said. Sheriff Vale's boots pounded up the front stairs. Eva and Jeremiah reached the back staircase, but Colonel Blackwood was already climbing from that direction, blocking their escape. They were trapped. Eva pushed Jeremiah toward a bedroom at the end of the hall. Inside, she moved to the window and looked down. A 20-foot drop to hard ground. Probably survivable, but not quietly. Sheriff Vale reached the study and shouted when he saw the open safe. "They're in the house. Find them." Eva made a decision that revealed the depth of her training. She grabbed a heavy candlestick from the bedroom dresser and hurled it through the window at the far end of the hall. Glass shattered loudly. As the three men rushed toward the sound, Eva and Jeremiah slipped into a linen closet and pulled the door closed behind them. In the cramped darkness, they pressed against each other, barely breathing. Colonel Blackwood's voice carried clearly through the thin door. "The safe's been cleaned out. Everything's gone." "How did they know about the documents?" Judge Reeves sounded panicked. "Someone's been watching us. Learning our routines." Sheriff Vale's voice was different from his usual demeanor. Sharper, more professional. After 20 minutes of searching, the men moved downstairs. Eva and Jeremiah waited another hour before emerging from their hiding place. Outside, Eva spread the stolen documents on the ground and studied them by moonlight. Survey reports showing the exact location of the silver vein, financial projections calculating profits from the mine, and a list of other properties targeted for acquisition. "This proves everything," Jeremiah said. "It proves the land grab, but we need more to connect it to my family's murder." Eva held up the telegram. "This is evidence, but not enough for a federal court." "Federal court?" Eva looked at him directly for the first time since they had met. "My name is Evangeline Cross. I'm a federal investigator sent to expose territorial corruption. Your silver mine is the key to bringing down the entire network." Jeremiah stared at Eva in the moonlight, the stolen documents scattered between them like pieces of a puzzle finally taking shape. "Federal investigator?" "For 3 years, since they murdered my family in Colorado territory." Eva's voice carried the weight of professional training mixed with personal pain. "My father was testifying against a land fraud ring. Colonel Blackwood ordered their deaths to silence them. The abandonment hearing was 6 hours away. Judge Reeves would declare Jeremiah's land legally forfeit, then immediately transfer ownership to Colonel Blackwood for a fraction of its worth. Standard procedure in their operation." "How many territories?" Jeremiah asked. 7 that we know of, maybe more." Eva organized the documents with methodical precision. "They target mineral-rich properties, create disasters, buy cheap, then mine the resources. It's generated millions in illegal profits." A horse approached through the darkness. Both of them tensed, but Eva recognized the rider before Jeremiah could reach for his gun. Sheriff Vale dismounted, his hands visible and empty. In the moonlight, his face looked different. Younger, more alert. "Agent Cross, we need to move fast." Jeremiah's confusion must have shown on his face. Eva stood, suddenly transformed from mysterious woman to federal authority. "Deputy Marshal Thomas Vale, working undercover for 8 months, she said. "He's been gathering evidence on the corruption network from the inside." Vale approached, keeping his voice low. "Blackwood knows the documents are missing. He's moving up the timeline. The hearing starts at dawn instead of noon." "Can you delay it?" "Judge Reeves takes orders from Blackwood." Not the law. Vale pulled a leather portfolio from his saddlebag. But I've got something better. Financial records showing bribes paid to territorial officials. Names, dates, amounts. Eva studied the papers by lantern light. Bank transfers. Promissory notes. A complete paper trail of corruption stretching across multiple territories. Her federal training had taught her to recognize evidence that would stand up in court. This is enough for prosecutions, but we need to connect it directly to the murders. There's more. Vale pointed to a section of handwritten notes. Blackwood keeps detailed records of his operations, including orders for elimination of witnesses. Jeremiah read over Eva's shoulder. The clinical language made his stomach turn. Names of families. Dates of deaths, methods of elimination, all recorded like business transactions. Eva's family was listed under Colorado territory. Date of death, payment to hired men, notation that the witness problem had been resolved. He documented his own crimes, Jeremiah said. Arrogance, Eva replied. He never expected federal investigation to reach this territory. Vale checked his pocket watch. 4 hours until the hearing. Blackwood's bringing in additional men from outside town. He's preparing for trouble. How many? 12, maybe 15. All armed. Vale's expression was grim. He knows this is his last chance to legitimize the land grab before federal oversight arrives. Eva made a decision that revealed the full extent of her authority. She pulled a small metal badge from her coat and pinned it to her shirt. Federal investigator credentials, hidden until now. We're not running from a hearing. We're conducting arrests. She spread a map of the territory on the ground, marking locations with practiced efficiency. Her movements were those of someone trained in federal law enforcement, not the traveling woman she had pretended to be. Vale, you position yourself inside the courthouse. When I give the signal, place Judge Reeves under federal arrest for conspiracy and bribery. What about Blackwood? I'll handle him directly. Eva's voice carried cold determination. 3 years of investigation ends tomorrow. Jeremiah felt like he was watching strangers plan a military operation. The woman who had asked if he feared or desired her was gone, replaced by a federal agent with authority to arrest territorial officials. Where do I fit in this? Eva looked at him directly. You're the key witness. Your testimony about the silver mine proves motive for the land grab. Without you, it's just paperwork. And if I refuse, then Colonel Blackwood wins. He keeps your inheritance, and my family's murderers go free. Eva's professional mask slipped for a moment, revealing the personal stakes underneath. But that's your choice. Vale mounted his horse. I need to get back before they notice I'm missing. Be ready at dawn. As he rode away, Eva continued planning with the focus of someone trained in federal operations. She had maps of escape routes, knowledge of territorial law, contacts in multiple jurisdictions. How long have you been planning this? Jeremiah asked. Since the day they killed my parents. Eva rolled up the maps. I applied for federal training specifically to investigate this case, learned law enforcement, studied territorial corruption, traced the network across 7 territories. And you came here because of my silver mine? I came here because your mine is the financial center of their entire operation. Control the silver, control the money. Control the money, control the territory. Dawn was approaching. In the distance, riders moved toward town. Colonel Blackwood's reinforcements arriving for the hearing that would determine everything. Eva checked her weapon, a small derringer hidden in her coat. Federal issue. Standard equipment for undercover investigators. One more question, Jeremiah said. When you asked if I feared or desired you, what were you really asking? Eva met his eyes. I was asking if you'd trust me enough to fight for justice, or if you'd run away like everyone else. The sun began to rise over Dustwater Gulch. In 3 hours, either justice would prevail, or corruption would claim another victory. The courthouse filled with an unusual crowd for a dawn hearing. Colonel Blackwood's hired men positioned themselves along the walls. Their presence meant to intimidate anyone who might oppose the proceedings. Judge Reeves entered through his private chambers, avoiding eye contact with the assembled townspeople. Eva sat in the back row, her federal badge hidden but her documents organized in a leather case beside her. She had spent the hours before dawn coordinating with federal marshals in 3 neighboring territories. Telegraph messages confirmed that simultaneous arrests would occur across the corruption network. Jeremiah took his place at the defendant's table, officially representing himself in the abandonment proceeding. The stolen documents were secured with Deputy Marshal Vale, who stood near the judge's bench in his role as local law enforcement. Judge Reeves called the hearing to order with obvious reluctance. His hands trembled as he shuffled through papers, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the morning chill. The matter before this court concerns the abandoned property of Jeremiah Stone, located 12 miles west of town. Colonel Blackwood sat in the front row, flanked by 2 of his hired men. His silver hair was perfectly groomed, his suit expensive and well-tailored. He projected the confidence of a man who had never lost a legal proceeding in this courthouse. Your Honor, Mr. Stone has failed to maintain his property or pay territorial taxes for 6 months. The land should be declared forfeit and made available for public auction. Eva watched Judge Reeves closely. The man was clearly uncomfortable, but bound by the corrupt system he had helped create. His ruling was predetermined, purchased through years of bribes and intimidation. Jeremiah stood to address the court. His voice carried clearly through the packed room. Your Honor, I have evidence that my property was deliberately destroyed as part of a conspiracy to steal mineral rights worth millions of dollars. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was not the broken man they had expected to see surrender his land without a fight. Judge Reeves looked toward Colonel Blackwood, seeking guidance. The colonel's expression remained calm, but his eyes held a warning. Mr. Stone, this court deals in legal matters, not conspiracy theories. Eva rose from her seat in the back. Her movement was calm and deliberate, drawing attention without causing alarm. Your Honor, I have federal documents that prove Mr. Stone's claims. The room fell silent. Colonel Blackwood turned in his seat, studying Eva with sharp interest. He had seen her around town but dismissed her as irrelevant. That dismissal had been a critical mistake. Judge Reeves struggled to maintain control of his courtroom. This is a territorial proceeding, miss. Federal authority has no jurisdiction here. Eva walked forward, her steps echoing in the quiet room. When she reached the front, she pulled out her federal badge and held it where everyone could see. Agent Evangeline Cross, Federal Bureau of Investigation. This proceeding is now under federal oversight. Colonel Blackwood's composure cracked for the first time. His hired men shifted nervously, unsure whether to act or wait for orders. Deputy Marshal Vale stepped forward, revealing his true identity to the packed courtroom. Deputy United States Marshal Thomas Vale, Judge Reeves, you are under federal arrest for conspiracy, bribery, and obstruction of justice. The courthouse erupted. Some townspeople cheered while others sat in shocked silence. Colonel Blackwood's men reached for their weapons, but Vale's badge and federal authority gave them pause. Eva opened her leather case and began presenting documents with professional precision. Survey reports showing the silver deposits beneath Jeremiah's land. Financial records proving bribes paid to Judge Reeves. Bank transfers connecting Colonel Blackwood to corruption in multiple territories. These documents prove a systematic conspiracy to defraud property owners across 7 territories. The estimated value of stolen resources exceeds $10 million. Colonel Blackwood finally spoke, his voice maintaining its authoritative tone despite the circumstances. Agent Cross, you're operating outside your jurisdiction. Territorial courts handle local property disputes. Not when those disputes involve federal crimes. Eva produced the telegram they had stolen from Blackwood's safe. This document connects you to the murder of federal witnesses in Colorado Territory. The telegram's contents were read aloud. Clinical descriptions of eliminated witnesses, payment records for hired killers, Colonel Blackwood's direct orders to silence Eva's family before they could testify. Jeremiah watched the proceedings with growing amazement. The woman who had approached him in the desert had orchestrated a federal case that spanned multiple territories. Her investigation had been building for 3 years, waiting for the right moment to strike. Other ranchers began speaking up from the crowd. Tom Morrison described the suspicious flood that destroyed his irrigation system. The Rodriguez family detailed how their well water had been deliberately poisoned. Similar stories emerged from throughout the territory. Ava coordinated their testimonies with federal efficiency. Each story supported the pattern of systematic property theft. Each witness strengthened the case against the corruption network. Deputy Marshal Vale placed Judge Reeves in custody, while Eva continued presenting evidence. Financial projections showing the true value of mineral rights, maps detailing targeted properties, communications between corrupt officials across territorial boundaries. Colonel Blackwood's hired men began slipping out of the courthouse as federal authority asserted control. Without local protection, they had no legal standing to interfere with federal arrests. The morning sun streamed through courthouse windows as Eva concluded her presentation. 3 years of investigation had led to this moment. Justice for her murdered family was finally within reach. Jeremiah's silver mine rights were formally restored by federal authority. His inheritance was secure, but more importantly, the corruption that had destroyed so many lives was finally exposed. Eva gathered her documents, her federal case complete. The network that had operated with impunity for years would face justice in federal courts across multiple territories. The beautiful black woman who had asked about fear and desire had revealed herself to be something far more powerful than anyone had imagined. Colonel Blackwood stood in shackles before the federal judge, his silver hair disheveled and his expensive suit wrinkled from 3 days in territorial jail. The man who had commanded respect and fear throughout the territory now looked ordinary and defeated. Federal Judge Morrison read the charges with methodical precision. Conspiracy across territorial boundaries, murder of federal witnesses, systematic fraud involving mineral rights. The list continued for nearly 10 minutes. Eva sat at the prosecution table, her federal credentials displayed prominently. She had spent the week coordinating with prosecutors in 7 territories, building an airtight case that connected decades of corruption. Agent Cross, present your evidence. Ava rose and addressed the packed courtroom with the authority of someone who had dedicated 3 years to this moment. The stolen documents from Blackwood's safe were entered as evidence. Survey reports proving deliberate targeting of mineral-rich properties. Financial records showing bribes to territorial officials. The telegram ordering her family's murder was read aloud. The clinical language describing their deaths as a business transaction sent silence through the courtroom. Eva's voice never wavered, but Jeremiah could see the cost of maintaining professional composure. Judge Morrison studied each document carefully. Federal courts operated differently from territorial proceedings. Evidence had to meet strict standards. Witnesses needed corroboration. The case had to be bulletproof. Deputy Marshal Vale, present your testimony regarding the undercover investigation. Vale took the stand and described 8 months of gathering evidence from inside the corruption network. He had documented bribes, recorded conversations, and photographed secret documents. His testimony painted a picture of systematic criminal enterprise spanning multiple territories. Tom Morrison testified about the suspicious flood that destroyed his ranch. Engineers confirmed that his irrigation dam had been deliberately weakened with dynamite. The Rodriguez family described poisoned well water that testing revealed contained industrial chemicals. Each witness strengthened the federal case. The pattern of property theft became undeniable when viewed across territorial boundaries. What appeared to be isolated incidents were revealed as coordinated attacks. Jeremiah took the stand to describe his burned ranch and the discovery of silver deposits beneath his property. He presented his grandfather's mining documents, proving legal ownership of mineral rights worth millions of dollars. The financial motive for arson became clear. Eva called additional witnesses from other territories. Federal marshals described similar operations in Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. The corruption network had generated over $15 million in illegal profits across 7 territories. Colonel Blackwood's defense attorney attempted to discredit federal jurisdiction, but Judge Morrison shut down those arguments quickly. Murder of federal witnesses placed the entire case under federal authority. Territorial boundaries meant nothing when crimes crossed state lines. The prosecution rested after 2 days of testimony. Ava had presented overwhelming evidence of the conspiracy, supported by documents, witnesses, and expert testimony. The case was thorough and professional, built to withstand any appeal. Judge Morrison deliberated for less than an hour. When he returned, his expression was grim. "Colonel Harrison Blackwood, this court finds you guilty on all federal charges. You are sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole." The courtroom erupted in cheers from the victims and their families. Justice had finally arrived for those who had suffered under Blackwood's corrupt regime. Judge Reeves received 15 years for his role in the conspiracy. Other territorial officials faced similar sentences. The entire network that had operated with impunity for decades was dismantled in a single week of federal prosecutions. Eva gathered her documents as the courtroom emptied. Her federal case was complete. Her family's murderers brought to justice through legal means rather than revenge. The professional satisfaction was real, but it came with an unexpected emptiness. Jeremiah approached her at the prosecution table. He had been transformed from a broken rancher to a wealthy mine owner, but the change felt secondary to what had happened between them during the investigation. "What happens now?" he asked. "Federal oversight continues for 2 years. New territorial judges will be appointed. The stolen properties are returned to their rightful owners." Eva's voice carried professional satisfaction mixed with personal uncertainty. "I meant with you." Eva paused in organizing her papers. She had planned this moment for 3 years, but never considered what came after justice was served. Her federal career would continue. Other territories needed investigation. Other corruption networks required dismantling. The Bureau has assignments waiting. Colorado needs a new field office supervisor. "That's not what I asked." Eva met his eyes directly. The question of fear versus desire had evolved into something deeper during their partnership. Trust built through shared danger, respect earned through mutual courage, attraction that grew from genuine understanding. "I don't know," she admitted. Outside the courthouse, the town of Dustwater Gulch was already changing. Legitimate businesses replaced corrupt enterprises. Fair legal proceedings replaced purchased verdicts. The community that had lived under Blackwood's control was learning to govern itself honestly. Jeremiah's silver mine would provide jobs for dozens of families. The mineral wealth would fund schools and roads and honest development. The inheritance his grandfather had left was finally serving its intended purpose. Eva stood on the courthouse steps, watching the transformation begin. Her federal badge represented duty and justice, but it also meant a life of constant travel and investigation, never settling, never building something permanent. Jeremiah joined her on the steps, looking out at the town they had helped liberate. "The mine's going to need someone to manage federal compliance, someone who understands territorial law and mineral rights." Eva smiled at his indirect offer. That person would need extensive legal training and federal experience. "Know anyone qualified?" The question hung between them like her original challenge in the desert. Fear versus desire had become duty versus love, justice versus happiness. The choice was hers alone. 6 months after the federal trials, Eva stood in the doorway of a newly constructed ranch house, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. The charred ruins of Jeremiah's original home had been cleared away, replaced by a structure built to last generations. She held a telegram from the Federal Bureau, offering her promotion to district supervisor in Colorado. The position would mean authority over 5 territories and a substantial increase in salary. It also meant leaving Dustwater Gulch forever. Jeremiah emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 cups of coffee, a morning ritual they had developed over the months of rebuilding. His transformation from broken rancher to successful mine owner was complete. But Eva knew her own journey remained unresolved. "Bureau wants an answer today," she said, showing him the telegram. "What are you going to tell them?" Eva walked onto the porch, breathing in the clean desert air. Below them, the Silverbrook mine operated with legitimate permits and fair wages. Jeremiah had hired Tom Morrison as foreman and offered jobs to every family affected by Blackwood's corruption. The community was healing. 3 years ago, I would have taken the promotion without hesitation. And now I'm not sure what I want anymore. The sound of approaching horses interrupted their conversation. A delegation from town rode up the path to the ranch house, led by the newly appointed territorial judge and the legitimate sheriff who had replaced Vale when he returned to federal service. Judge Catherine Hayes dismounted first, a woman in her 50s who had been sent from the territorial capital to restore honest governance. She carried herself with the authority of someone accustomed to difficult assignments. "Agent Cross, Mr. Stone, we have a proposition." They gathered on the porch as Judge Hayes explained the territorial government's offer. Ava's expertise in corruption investigation was needed to establish permanent oversight systems. The position would combine federal authority with territorial responsibility, creating a new type of law enforcement role. "The territory needs someone who understands both federal and local law," Judge Hayes continued, "someone with investigation experience and community trust." Sheriff Martinez, Morrison's replacement, added his support. "The people here respect what you accomplished. They'd follow your leadership." Eva considered the offer carefully. It would mean staying in Dustwater Gulch, working with Jeremiah to build something lasting. But it also represented a departure from her federal career and the mission that had defined her life since her family's murder. "I need time to think," she said. After the delegation left, Eva walked to the cemetery where her parents were buried. Jeremiah had arranged for their bodies to be transported from Colorado and interred in a peaceful plot overlooking the valley. Fresh flowers decorated their graves, a weekly ritual Eva had maintained. She knelt beside the headstones, speaking aloud to the silence. "I got them, Papa. Blackwood died in federal prison last month. Judge Reeves is serving his sentence. The network is completely destroyed." She paused, touching her father's name carved in granite. "I kept my promise." The wind stirred the desert grass, carrying the distant sounds of the mine operation and the rebuilding town. Eva had spent 3 years focused entirely on revenge and justice. Now, with that mission complete, she faced the question of what came next. Jeremiah found her there as the sun began to set. He sat beside her without speaking, respecting the moment of communion with her lost family. "They would have liked you," Eva said eventually. "I would have liked them. My father always said justice was just the foundation. You had to build something good on top of it. Or the foundation was worthless." Eva stood and brushed dirt from her dress. The federal telegram crinkled in her pocket, still waiting for an answer. But as she looked out over the valley, she realized the choice had already been made. The next morning she sent 2 telegrams. The first declined the federal promotion with thanks and requested transfer to territorial advisory status. The second accepted Judge Hayes's offer to establish the Territorial Corruption Oversight Office. The wedding took place 3 months later in the rebuilt church of Dustwater Gulch. Tom Morrison walked Eva down the aisle, representing the community that had embraced her as family. Judge Hayes performed the ceremony, making it both legal and symbolic of the new honest governance. The entire town attended, including families from neighboring territories who had benefited from the exposure of the corruption network. Deputy Marshal Vale traveled from Colorado to serve as Jeremiah's best man, completing the circle of those who had fought for justice. Eva wore her grandmother's dress, altered to fit but carrying the tradition forward. Jeremiah wore a new suit purchased with legitimate mining profits, looking more confident than the broken man she had found in the ashes 6 months earlier. Their vows were simple but profound, promises to build together what neither could create alone, commitment to serve their community while nurturing their love, words that transformed their partnership from professional necessity to personal choice. The celebration continued into the evening with music and dancing in the town square. Children who had grown up under Blackwood's oppression played freely in the streets. Their parents planned futures based on honest work and fair treatment. As the night wound down, Eva and Jeremiah stood together on their porch, watching the lights of their thriving community. The question she had asked in the desert about fear and desire had been answered through months of shared struggle and mutual respect. "Do you ever regret staying?" Jeremiah asked. Eva considered the question seriously, then smiled. "Ask me again in 50 years. The desert wind carried the sounds of a healthy town settling into peaceful sleep. Justice had been served, but more importantly, justice had become the foundation for building something good.